We're doing a countdown now, Rizwan? Okay, cool. Kia ora, salam, namaste, sat sri akal. I'm your host, Ajay Vasisht, with The Weekender on Sunday. Today, we'll be speaking to Hutt South National MP Chris Bishop a bit later in the show. But first, centre stage in New Zealand and around the world this last week. New Zealand has officially marked 100 days without any community transmission of COVID-19 cases, with no further new cases in managed isolation reported today. A new poll shows New Zealand First List MP Shane Jones coming third in the contest for the Northland seat that's being seen as a crucial thing to his party's chances of staying in the parliament. And in Beirut, Lebanon, that horrific blast, which left over 300,000 people homeless, is creating even more tensions and a humanitarian crisis. और उसके अलावा केरल में कोझिकोड में कारीपुर एयरपोर्ट पर हादसे में शिकार हुए एयर इंडिया एक्सप्रेस के विमान का मौसम के कारण क्रैश हुआ था या कोई और भी वजह थी, इस पे भी बात होगी. And we'll be coming back to more look at the coronavirus cases locally as well as globally a bit later on. But let's start with a warm welcome to today's show in our head-to-head series. Our guest is the Honourable Chris Bishop, MP for Hutt South. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
It's definitely good to have you here. And given that you're the shadow leader of the House and a spokesperson for transport and infrastructure, I think your job in the coming election and trying to get the messaging out is going to be one of the key ones.
Yes. We're certainly keen to promote transport in New Zealand. It's going to be a critical issue in this year's election campaign. Where this is a country that is choked by congestion, and it's really important that we build the transport and infrastructure that we need in both our major cities, but also in our provinces and our rural parts of the community as well. And so we've placed a heavy priority on it. And I think particularly in light of the COVID economic situation, or the situation post-COVID, it's even more important that we invest heavily in transport and in our infrastructure.
So we're definitely going to be looking a lot more into that, because I think the government has been kind of been congratulated on its COVID-19 response, and I think the National Party is a little bit on the mat, as it were. Let's start with that really interesting announcement that Judith Collins made about a $31 billion investment plan towards infrastructure in general, and I guess a whole lot of other things related to it. What is that vision? What is that vision that National has for New Zealand going forth?
Yeah, so Judith Collins announced a couple of weeks ago now that we have a $31 billion transport infrastructure package, and it's worth noting that that's over and above what the current government is spending. So we're taking everything the current government's doing on roads and rail and roundabouts and things like that through the Provincial Growth Fund, and we're adding $31 billion on top. So a sizable investment in the future of our country. And in our cities, that means rapid transit in both Auckland and Wellington, and in our provinces and our region, that means expressways. So we've got a dream or a vision of building a four-lane highway between Whangarei in the north, Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga. Those expressways, those four-lane roads, are the safest roads in the country, and of course they make it much easier for freight to get around. We want to significantly expand our rail networks as well. Rail moves quantities of freight in New Zealand, and of course very important part of the metro networks in both Auckland and Wellington as well. So transport, when you think about it, touches us every day, whether it's jumping on a plane to visit some friends, or moving ports to and from our ports, or whether or not it's just simply picking up kids after school or going to rugby practice or ballet practice. Transport touches all of our lives on a day-to-day basis, so it's critical we invest in that for the future of our country.
So how does that balance, if you like, with what we surely believe is coming our way, which is the barreling train of a debt-ridden society and the impending and in progress downturn, the economic downturn. How does that balance with that? Where are you going to take money away from the infrastructure side of things and to be able to still handle what's coming to barreling towards the economy?
Is that there's no doubt we're going to have to borrow in the next few years. There's just no question about that, because COVID is going to have a huge economic impact on us, and it's the role of government to get us through that. So our view is that if we're going to borrow, we should borrow for investments that will make a difference and get people into jobs, both in the short term and in the long term. So we will be borrowing, but borrowing for things like the second harbour crossing, and borrowing for things like rail to the airport in Auckland, borrowing for things like the expansion of busways around Auckland, and borrowing for the second Mount Victoria tunnel in Wellington, for example. Those are investments that over time pay for themselves, and of course they also get people into work and create jobs both in the short term and of course drive economic growth in the medium to long term as well. So we think that's a good form of debt. The bad form of debt is just simply borrowing for wasteful things like fees-free tertiary education, for example. That doesn't really move the dial on the economy. It's just borrowing, for, we would argue, not particularly huge amount of reward. So we'd rather borrow for hard infrastructure that really makes a difference to New Zealand.
So what about jobs outside of the infra-focused projects? What about jobs in other sectors, education, tourism, which seems to have basically got a big one in the gut and may not be coming back for several years? Farming, white-collar jobs, retail. Is there a plan for stimulating that, the other areas of the economy?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've announced a couple of really interesting policies so far. One's called Job Start, which gives employers $10,000 to take on a new worker, which we want to get up and running straight away after, if we have the privilege of winning the election, which will essentially incentivise people to take on workers. And so that's been pretty well received. And the current government announced, not a too dissimilar plan to it yesterday at their campaign launch. So, good ideas come from more places, I suppose. And the second thing we announced is a thing called Business Start, which is a policy to allow people to take money out of their KiwiSaver to start a new business. But look, no one's pretending that there isn't going to be significant economic dislocation in this economy. I mean, we've got a closed border where tourism is our largest export earner. And there aren't going to be that many tourists coming to New Zealand in the foreseeable future, and likewise with international education as well. So that, I think, speaks even more than before to the importance of getting a domestic economy going well, looking at things like infrastructure investment. And look, to be honest, even little things like fixing potholes and roads and getting people to work on small infrastructure investments. If you talk to the construction sector, they'll tell you that they're really looking for that pipeline of work, and they're looking to, they're really looking for those projects that they can get on with in the short term. So we've got to think both in the short term and in the long term, and we're pretty focused on both elements.
So a while back, you'd written a very interesting piece about what was needed to grow Lower Hutt and to get it moving again, because you saw impediments, and the growth in population in the area had created housing shortages and all sorts of other issues, transport inclusive. Do you see that on a micro scale in comparison to probably what's needed in the rest of the country as well?
Yeah, look, I think Lower Hutt in many ways is a bit of a microcosm for the wider New Zealand economy and society, particularly when it comes to housing and transport. We've probably underinvested over a period of time in Lower Hutt, and that means that we've got congestion choking the city, and of course we've got housing problems in Lower Hutt as well. The social housing wait list has quintupled in the last 3 years. It's gone up 500%. We've got homelessness in the city, and we've got huge house price growth as well. Now that's great if you own a house in Lower Hutt, but it's not so great if you're a renter, and not so great if you're on a fixed income, as many people on pensions, many pensions are. So the solution is we've got to free up more land for housing, but we've also got to build the transport links to open up that land. And that's why we've announced that we'll build a thing called the Petone to Granada Road, which is a road that connects State Highway 2 to State Highway 1. It's reasonably controversial, but it does free up thousands of houses, or land that can support thousands of houses, And of course, it reduces congestion on parts of State Highway 2 and State Highway 1 as well. So we simply do have to get on with the job of building these transport links that can drive our economy forward. That's something that I'm passionate about in Lower Hutt, but also passionate about for the wider economy in the country.
So do you think the biggest impediment to getting the housing sector going, and I think the counterparts in the Labour Party, Phil Twyford in particular, and probably Megan Woods as well, they've had a really hard time with it. But you were I think you kind of brought forward a very open view to it. You also pointed out that since 2015, there had not been the kind of investment needed in getting housing projects going. So you see that the previous government, as well as this current one, have all kind of let down the housing sector. And what's the real impediment? Is it political will? Is it the RMA? Or is it just that you guys just want to score points off each other every time there's an election and the different party gets into power?
A major barrier to housing growth, and both parties are now supportive of essentially repealing the Resource Management Act and starting again. So there's no doubt about that. Look, in some ways, this is a little bit bipartisan because a lot of the work that the current Minister, Phil Twyford's doing, started under us. So some quite complicated things around infrastructure financing, making it easier for local government to finance new development. That started under us. He's continuing that work, and that's really good. In fact, the Parliament's just passed a bill to implement some of those changes. That's good.
Yes.
Things like again, a little bit wonky, a little bit technical, a little bit nerdy, but still really important. Phil Twyford the other day published a document which basically bans minimum car parking requirements from our councils, and that will, it sounds a bit weird, but it's true. That will significantly will have an impact on the cost of housing. It will make it cheaper because no longer will councils be able to impose minimum car parking requirements on developments, which raises the cost of apartments, for example. So all those things that we sort of started, the current government's continuing, but the great regret I would have is that it's taken too long to get to this point. But progress sometimes takes a while. The key thing is that we get there, and we do need.
Do you also think? Sorry to interrupt you, but do you also think the RMA currently in place is really written for the last century, maybe at least a decade out of date?
Yeah, well, the RMA was written at a time in 1990 when things were very different, and I think the simple view is that it has not worked at either protecting the environment particularly, but most importantly, by combining environmental bottom lines with planning law regimes, it has hindered both. And I think there's actually cross-party recognition of that now, and it just simply hasn't worked. We do need to throw it out. It's made it very difficult to do anything in this country, and one of the effects has been to make it very difficult to keep new housing going. And I don't want to live in a country where the average house is $1 million, which is 10 times the median income of New Zealanders. That makes our housing some of the most unaffordable in the developed world. And if you look around the country, there's plenty of land. It was not like we suffer from a shortage of land in New Zealand. There's plenty of land in this country. It's just a question of how we use it.
So why don't we scrap it sooner? I mean, how long did it take to bring the RMA in when it was first brought in? And now it's going to take 18 years to get it out.
Well, it's going to take 30 years. But no, I think we have a bill ready to go. If we've got the privilege of winning the election, we've got a bill pretty much ready to go. The current government's doing some work on it as well. My hope would be that this could be a bipartisan initiative. It does stick in the craw a little bit for us because we spent 9 years in government trying to reform the RMA, opposed by the Green Party and the Labour Party. But now they've got the opportunity. They sort of realise the mistakes as well. So,
but surely it's really only benefiting the people who are giving the mortgages and the people who are invested in and have a vested interest in the housing market, in the sales and purchase. Look, investment buyers set aside, it's basically the banks and the industry around it. And
look, there's no doubt that if you've got a stake in the existing housing market, it's happy days for you. because house prices have increased year on year. They keep going up year on year. Rents keep going up. So yeah, look, there is a real issue there, and we've got to get on top of it.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be something that we could put in National's basket and say for 9 years you guys just sat on it? You even sold off the housing stock that was there in the housing corporation, the old housing corporation.
So we transferred and sold some state houses to other social housing providers. So
yes,
it's not like the houses disappeared. That the houses were still owned by social housing providers, in some cases community housing providers. The houses didn't disappear; they were sold. And the current government's doing it too. By the way, they are selling state houses into the private market and then using the proceeds to build new state homes. They're doing it. We did it as well. So they've made a big song and dance about stopping the great housing state house sell-off. They're doing exactly the same thing.
So you'd be in favor of redistributing some of the banking profits back to the populace, or is that like whoa?
Example, in my electorate, the Housing New Zealand has sold a earthquake-prone state house. It was not fit for purpose. They looked at upgrading it. It would have cost too much money, so they sold the house. I think Housing New Zealand got about $300,000 for it. They sold it to a developer. That developer will redevelop that land and put probably a private house on it. But Housing New Zealand used the proceeds from selling that land to reinvest in other homes in the Hutt Valley. Now, I would argue, and that's under the current government, I would argue that that's a good outcome. If it costs the government too much money to upgrade a house, sell it, use the proceeds to invest somewhere else. And that's what we've done in other parts of the country as well. And that's what we did, and that's what these guys are doing as well. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for the state housing provider in New Zealand owned by the government to not adjust its portfolio. That's what every other developer does. They adjust their portfolio. So the state housing corporation's got to do the same.
So I'll give you points on that one. But the point still remains that the people who have gained out of it most are the industry that shows the record profits all the time. And sure, we need them to run society, to live, to bank, and to all have accounts and get mortgages and stuff. But those record profits, they don't seem to go back into the pockets of the populace.
Yeah, I mean, you are completely right that housing affordability is a big driver of inequality. No doubt about it. I mean, when you've got 10 times the median income.
So what's the solution? What's the solution? Because at the moment, only the people who have the leverage, who have the money, who can lend it to others who are in need of it, are the ones winning. What is the solution then? How do we get equality? How do we get more equity?
So the solution is to make it much easier for force councils to free up land for housing, and then build the infrastructure to connect to that land. So you need more greenfields and brownfields development on the fringes of cities, which lowers the marginal cost of new land and new housing. But you also need intensification around major public transport hubs. And again, Phil Twyford is doing that, and we agree with that. In fact, we started that work. So it doesn't make any sense to take my electorate of Lower Hutt, for example. We've got state homes on quarter-acre sections next to train stations. Well, actually, you can put 2 to 3 homes on that land. You can build apartments next to train stations because you're giving people the option of using public transport to get to and from work. So densifying our housing is important as well, and you're seeing some of that in Auckland right now through the Auckland Unitary Plan, and that'll happen in other parts of the country as well. The simple point is this: we've got to build more homes, and that doesn't necessarily mean quarter-acre sections with a 3-bedroom house. It can mean apartments, it can mean smaller homes, it can mean modular housing as well.
Yep. I think I'd give you a point on that one as well. I think the consensus is that we do need a better public transport system. We do need not just the light rail, but I think you need connectivity. A bit like the biggest cities around the world, Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, Melbourne. Wherever there is a spread of population, you need to be able to bring them in and out efficiently and cheaply. Usually, it's
a couple of those cities that you mentioned, and their public transport systems are really good, and they're much better than Auckland and Wellington's and Christchurch.
Yes.
So absolutely, we've got to invest in those.
I remember reading an article in one of the archives from the Herald dating back to the 80s, where someone had come up with I can't even remember it 100%, 200 million or a $2 billion cost to build rail around Auckland. I think this dates back to the Muldoon era. And they were like, no, it's too expensive. We can't go there.
Well, it's funny you say that, because actually the plan from the 70s, which was called Robbie's Rapid Rail, which is
yes,
my Robinson's vision of rail in Auckland, we're now basically bringing that back. That's our policy. We want to build rail to the airport from Puanui. We want to build rail from the airport up through Onehunga, and we want to build the Avondale to South Down rail line as well, and we want to expand the South Rail link. That's actually our vision. And, rapid transit in Auckland, nothing moves people around like heavy rail. And, the Wellington Metro Rail Network, I took the train to and from school every day for 5 years. It's a wonderful thing. And, of course, everyone on a train is not on the road, clogging up the road. So that's a great thing. So we do want to really expand our rail network.
So I think you're going to need to talk to the Japs or talk to Mr. Krishnan, who set up the Delhi Metro. Against all odds in a highly populated society. So just moving away from that a little bit in terms of what is happening with the polling, and everybody's kind of dismissive of it, especially from the National Party. It's you've even dubbed it the rogue poll. What do you think National needs to do to get back on the horse?
Make their judgment. Well, I think we're travelling pretty well. I think no one doubts that the current government did a pretty good job during the lockdown and did the right thing there, and provided.
But 25%, even for a rogue poll with a margin of error of plus or minus 2 or 3%, that's what they usually say. It surely still only gets to 28% or 30% if you're going to be kind. That's not getting you back into Parliament.
Well, it doesn't. We don't agree with the poll that has us on about 25%. Our numbers have us much higher than that, towards the late 30s, as I think people have said publicly. Yes. And I think things will tighten up a bit as the election campaign, gets underway, and we're sort of in the campaign now. And I think a lot will turn on those last 4 weeks. A lot of people, I always staggered by the number of people who you ask them who they voted for after the campaign. They say, "Oh, I made up my mind in the booth. I went in and made up my mind." Just kind of decided there and then. So, I think a lot of people are just only switching on for the election now. Right. I've just been door knocking this afternoon, and a number of people say, "Oh, I haven't really thought about it yet. I don't know." So, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm pretty, I think we're in a good position.
So let's forget the ratings. Let's have a healthy, skeptical approach and not worry about them at all. What about on the ground and in terms of policies, apart from this $31 billion pie, a huge pie, what other policies has National got that can trump the government? Pardon the pun. Shouldn't use the word Trump anywhere these days.
Well, look, you'll have to wait and see for some more that's coming out, but we've got a very strong focus on education and on health as well. Those are things that are of critical importance to New Zealanders, and significant items of government expenditure. So you will see more policy around that. I'm spending the next few weeks going around the country announcing various transport projects in parts of the country as well. But we've got a strong focus on outlining how to get debt down over time as well. We're very worried about the level of debt build up from the current government. As I said before, everyone knows we have to go into debt. The question is just how much and what they spend it on. And we're concerned about some of the expenditure that the government is undertaking. And you will see a path back to get that net debt down, which I think is a good thing. But also a very strong focus on job creation as well. There's 237,000 people on the unemployment, on job seeker support at the moment. And of course, lots of people on the wage subsidy who are in a pretty precarious situation, because that wage subsidy can't go on forever. And so you've got people who, in a few weeks' time, months' time, unfortunately, may not have a job anymore, and we're concerned about that.
Do you think the government brought it really finely close to the election date, the job subsidy, to advantage themselves a little bit?
I mean, look, I wouldn't want to be so cynical as to accuse them of that. But look, there's no doubt that I think.
It's good for the country. It's good for us, the people on the receiving end of it. We've We've had
Yeah,
we've had a good ride of it, and it's really stopped us from having to die of anxiety and the
yeah,
stress that's related to this economy.
there's no doubt it's worked well, and you've got to do that, and other countries like in the UK and Australia have done very
Yep.
similar things, all with different names, but they're very similar, and it's exactly what you'd expect of government in this time. I mean, if the government decides by fiat to shut the economy down and make sure that people can't go to work, it makes sense that they provide the support to make sure that people aren't out of pocket so much. So look, I think undoubtedly the right thing, but the thing is, it has to come off. We can't, government can't pay everyone's wages forever.
Sure.
That would run out of money, literally. So it has to come off at some point. And the question.
So if the foreign lenders come calling and say, we want our debt back, who do I have to write my check out to?
Our net debt is relatively low by world standards. But it's going to go up in the next few years, of course. But of course, what we're borrowing at internationally is low. So interest rates are at record lows, which is a good thing. But we know that's not reason to not take debt seriously, because we're a very exposed economy, and in particular, we have very high levels of net private international debt. So we owe a lot of money to the rest of the world, largely mortgages, and because all of our banks are foreign owned or largely foreign owned. So we can't take it too jokingly. We have to be serious about it.
Oh, I think we're all going to be facing the music, definitely facing the music. It'll be hard work, because I don't know how many more reoccurrences there may happen with this COVID-19 until we get a control on it. On a totally unrelated but personal level, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
So I was going to say, on a totally unrelated, on a personal level, you're reading up on you. You're quite the record as a debater in your younger days, which surely comes in handy in Parliament. You have some good recollections of the younger days when you were winning things in Sydney and in even in New Zealand. And how many fiery ones have you been able to kind of do in Parliament?
Yeah, I did quite a lot of debating in my younger days overseas and for Victoria University, which was my university, and represented New Zealand overseas, which was good fun. I mean, parliamentary debating is a little bit different. Winston Peters and I had a good set to the other day. He had a bit of a go at me. I had a bit of a go at him. But I do enjoy the debating, and it's not debating just for its own sake. I enjoy the debating for the betterment of the country, and debating ideas that I think are good for New Zealand, and other guys think are not so good for New Zealand. And that's
so. Any best moment that stands out where you definitely trumped the other side?
Oh, I wouldn't want to say anything in particular in Parliament. I mean, I enjoyed my maiden speech. That was a few years ago now. It was 5 to 6 years.
Yep.
When I was at university, I debated at the Cambridge Union, won a tournament there. That was pretty special.
Right.
Debated in the grand final of the Oxford Union, which of course David Longy, spoke at about nuclear weapons back in 1985. So I stood at the same dispatch box that he stood at in the final of the tournament there. That was pretty fun. So yeah, and I've had it's provided me with lots of good memories and good knowledge about the world, I suppose you'd say, and some good travel opportunities. And I suppose that the only sad thing is now that the next generation of younger debaters coming through at school and university, can't do a lot of travel at the moment, or any travel. So some of those opportunities will be shut off, and hopefully it won't be for too much longer.
And it also sets you up for being able to do these kind of interviews really well as well, I would suppose.
I mean, I've been around for a few years now. I mean, it seems like only yesterday I became an MP, but it was actually 6 years ago, and apparently I've aged quite a bit in that time. I've got a few grey hairs now, and
it does take a toll. I think it does take a toll.
Yeah, it does. I was looking at a photo of me the other day when I was 31 when I became an MP, and I was very youthful. I was slimmer and I was more youthful, and now I'm bigger and a few greys. So, but that's politics. That's all good.
All right. So, in a short elevator pitch before we depart, why should people consider national come polling time?
Well, people need to think seriously about their vote, and I would argue that they should consider the National Party. We are facing our worst economic crisis in many generations, and we've got to have a critical focus on getting our economy back on track and growing jobs. And I would argue that only the National Party has a strong focus on that, and also the track record of delivery. We got us through the last GFC, we got us through the Christchurch earthquakes, and I believe it will be the National Party that gets us through the next crisis. Current government's done not a bad job during the lockdown and in the health response, but we now face an economic crisis, and it will take the National Party with our strong focus on infrastructure, jobs and growth, and a strong team to get us through.
So I was actually going to let you go on the end of that, but now you just raised something very interesting. So if you will excuse me, the strong team you're mentioning how well together is the caucus hanging, given all the ructions that have happened since Simon Bridges' ousture?
Look, we're in good shape. That is all behind us, very genuinely. There's only 4 weeks to go, and Judith Collins has been elected as our leader, and I think she's made a fantastic start as leader. So we're 100% behind her, the whole team. Obviously, it's been a rough couple of months in some respects, but we're through all that now. We're into the campaign period, and people can rely on us to get behind Judith.
So, Crusher Collins has become this kinder, gentler Collins. Is that just for the cameras, or is that something you're seeing in the backbenches and in Parliament as well?
Oh, look, I think people, the Crusher Collins thing's always been a bit of a caricature, to be honest.
Yes.
Media like to adopt these personas or monikers for people, and Crusher became her one. But she's always been a very kind person, I have to say. And
sure.
If you want an example of that, her staff are extremely loyal to her. She's a very good manager of people. She's a very good manager of the caucus as well, and she's done an outstanding job in the 3 weeks or so that she's been the leader. And I can't speak highly enough of the way in which she's managed some pretty tough circumstances, actually. So she's doing a really good job. And
perhaps it's experience and mellowing with time as well, and just understanding the way people are a bit better.
Yeah, look, she's a very experienced figure. She's been an MP since 2002, 18 years now, and she's run businesses herself. She's run a restaurant. She's been a lawyer. She's got a master's in tax. I think she's recently done some postgraduate health and safety qualifications. She's someone who loves learning. She loves politics, and she loves being a leader, and she loves this country, and that's the most important thing. So, look, I think she's done a great job, and I think she will continue to do one.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing your mind and heart, Chris, with us today. It's been really nice having you along. Good luck in the elections.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
And hope you romp in and keep that particular turf around your neighborhood blue. But the red fellas are coming after you, it seems. So I think it's going to be interesting for us, the punters.
Yeah, that's right. Look forward to catching up soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. So that was the Honourable Chris Bishop. He was very kind to share with us what he believes is going to be the thing that makes a difference to National's plans, that huge $31 billion infrastructure plan that they have put forward, and of course all the other things that they feel they can do better or deliver better in terms of just bringing a change and bringing somebody at the helm that they feel would do a better job economically. Now, we'll be looking at a couple of other bits of news and wanted to just check with my producer if we've got anybody else joining us today. Looks like it's not going to be happening. And so the way to round off today's show for you, I mentioned a couple of other news items that had come to us at the beginning of the show. One was that massive explosion that happened in Beirut, Lebanon, which left over 300,000 people homeless, and it was creating even more tensions and what is now akin to a humanitarian crisis. So at least 728 people have since been wounded in clashes with the authorities as thousands of protesters hit the streets of central Beirut, and riot police have had to fire tear gas at those trying to break through a barrier for the parliament building. Obviously, there is a lot of anger towards the government and the ruling elites in that part of the world because they see them as having been inept, corrupt, and been the cause for bringing about this horrific explosion, which has left so many people dead. One police officer was also killed during these clashes. Lebanon's Prime Minister Hassan Diab has called for early polls after Tuesday's deadly blast, saying it is the only way out of the country's crisis. People may not agree with that. Lebanese authorities have taken into custody 19 people as part of the investigation, and the death toll stands at least 158 people. And more than 6,000 others are counted among the injured. But the numbers are expected to rise as search and rescue operations continue for missing people. Rather sad news. और उधर भारतवर्ष में केरल के कोझिकोड में कारीपुर एयरपोर्ट पर हादसे का शिकार हुआ एयर इंडिया एक्सप्रेस का विमान क्या मौसम के कारण क्रैश हुआ या और कोई भी वजह हो सकती थी? रनवे पर तय जगह से लगभग 1000 मीटर आगे जाकर लैंड किया था. They landed about 1,000 meters ahead, which is like almost a kilometer. So he overshot the runway quite a bit. इसकी वजह से पायलट विमान की गति को कम कर उसे रनवे पर रोकने में सफल नहीं रहा. तो this could be one of the major causes. Also, the weather was quite inclement. वैसे हादसे के कारणों का पता लगाने के लिए जांच शुरू हो गई है और विमान का ब्लैक बॉक्स भी मिल गया है. हादसे में मरने वालों की संख्या 18 हो गई है. उसके अलावा हिंदुस्तान में उड्डयन मंत्री हरदीप सिंह पुरी ने अपने सहयोगी मंत्री और वरिष्ठ अधिकारियों के साथ मौके पर पहुंचकर हालात के जायजा भी किया है. तो उम्मीद है कि इसमें से और मृतकों की खबर नहीं आएगी. एंड दोज हु हैव सर्वाइव्ड, दोज हु हैव लॉस्ट, our minds and hearts and thoughts are with them, and those who have survived, we hope that they are well too and they'll be doing well. Another piece of news that we brought in the early part of the show was a new poll that shows New Zealand First List MP Shane Jones coming third in the contest for the Northland seat. Now, that's being seen as crucial to his party's chances of staying in Parliament. The Colma Brunton poll for TVNZ's Q&A program gives the incumbent National MP Matt King a firm lead with a 46% support. Labour's Willow Jean Prime has 31% and Jones is lagging far behind in third place at 15%. 11% of the respondents said they did not know who they would vote for or declined to answer. So could that swing either way, maybe between Labour and National? But on current form, Shane Jones, his ability to take that seat back is looking very, very questionable. NZ First Leader Winston Peters won the seat in a 2015 by-election, but was ousted by King in the 2017 general election. This seat is seen as a must-win for New Zealand First, which a One News poll last month placed at just 2% in the standing. Or, jate jate, in our WhatsApp corner, time for just a short one today. And if you're married or have a special other, this might be something that resonates with you. एक पति अपनी व्यथा सुनाते हुए बोले कि बीवी ने वाद किया, मैंने प्रतिवाद किया, उन्होंने बहस शुरू की, मैंने भी बहस की, वह चिल्लाई, मैं भी चिल्लाया, फिर वह रो पड़ी और इस तरह आखिर में आंखों से बरसाते आंसुओं में डकवर्थ लुईस नियम के अनुसार वह जीत गई. So on that Duckworth Lewis bit of news, I will leave you alone now and we'll join you again next week. आप सब अपना ख्याल रखें, जहां भी हैं, safe रहें, स्वस्थ रहें. I'm your host Ajay Vasisht with The Weekender on Sunday. I will see you next Sunday in, for now, Abhi Bhi, the safest country दुनिया भर में. Kia ora, salam, namaste, sat sri akal. Till next time, do follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube.